So the first 100K that we're talking about is the most brutal because it's the hardest to build up. And the reason why that is because time and compounding don't get to work for you. Most of that first 100K is money that you personally put in there and start to build up yourself. And it can feel frustrating because it doesn't feel like you're winning. Things happen slowly. Things are moving slowly. The contributions you make aren't as big as maybe you'd like to make because ideally in your 20s, you're not making as much money as you're going to make in your 30s and 40s. And this is where people start to have a problem and think, this is not going to work. And this is why when you go look at those investment calculators that I'm always talking about, and you see what happens at the beginning, or you see what these small amounts of money are, and over time, how they skyrocket, I get it doesn't feel like winning at the beginning, but I'm hoping that when you look at those calculators, it's motivational for you. Because again, when the game is 30 or 40 or 50 years, it never feels like winning in the short term because it takes a long time for it to happen. So the goal is early on is not to get rich, but it's to stay in the game. It's to build the habits. And it's just to go from 0 to 10,000 to 50,000 and get to that first 100,000 because I'm telling you, from 100,000 to 200,000 is a lot easier than it is to get from 0 to 100. Okay. Point number 2, the real win at the beginning isn't the number. Okay. Let me listen to that. The real win at the beginning isn't the number. It's proving to yourself you can set up a system, you can earn, you can save, you can invest, and not screw yourself up and not self-sabotage yourself and go to a point where you're just giving up or not winning at this thing. So, okay. So in the beginning, that first $100,000 requires multiple skills. What are some of these skills that it requires? Okay. It requires you to learn how to spend less than you make, live within your means, right? That's a skill that is necessary that a lot of people have a hard time with. You also want to figure out how to delay gratification. You want to learn how to automate all of this stuff. We talk about all the time, and you know my favorite book, The Automatic Millionaire? When you set these things up where you get paid and it automatically happens for you, then you don't have to worry about it long term. And it takes away some of these emotional decisions. I know in talking with my kids, some of the things that I'm overly conservative on has created some times for them where they have a hard time spending money. And my daughter especially has been doing amazing at all of this. And sometimes whenever she does spend a little bit of money, she just moved into her own place. And now she's buying some furniture, putting some art on the walls and doing a few things. And because of that, she always feels guilty when she spends some of that money. And I tell her all the time, I go, don't feel guilty. The whole point of having money is to be able to enjoy it and spend it. But what happens is when you create that financial freedom for yourself, it's now learning that next skill on how to be able to spend and enjoy a little bit of this. But she's learning on that. And she is well on her way to really winning at this game. And I try to help her and her friends and my kids' friends and do all that stuff. So point number 3 is this. After that first $100,000, small percentages, whether you start to earn 6 or 7 or 8 or 9%, start to really build out. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you start earning 7, 8, 9, 10% interest on $500,000, those numbers become a lot bigger than when you're earning it on $500 or $1,000 or $10,000. Okay. And that's when the compounding starts to become very visible. I was one of those, my parents never really liked to let me look in their investment accounts, but I wanted my kids to see mine, even though the numbers are probably numbers I didn't want them to know, because I want them to understand that when those numbers get bigger, when the market goes up and you start to earn an average, 7, 8, 9%, those numbers start to look big. And that's what I mean by getting from the first 100 to the second 100 to the third 100 to $1 million to $2 million. Those numbers really start to grow over time. And you start feeling like over time that now the investments are starting to make more money than your contributions are. And that's why, again, when you go to those investment calculators, and we'll put a link in the description below, when you go there and you start to look and say, okay, if I started at 20 or 30 or 40, and you start to look at what your contributions were versus what actually ends up in the account by the time you're in retirement age, it is crazy how much more the investments will make over your contributions. But at the beginning, a lot of it is your contributions. And that's where people start to struggle. They feel like, well, it's all just my own money and I'm never going to get ahead. But you've got to look at the long term, the long game, and understand that it really does start to matter. And that's why I know I joke all the time when people start joking about the $5, $10 coffees or the $25 lunches. You take $25 a week, which is be $100 a month, and all of a sudden it becomes $200 or $500 a month, and you play that out over time and mess around with that investment calculator. It is crazy what will happen. Okay. Point number 4. Most people fail because they interrupt the compounding. What does that mean? I can't tell how many times people talk about buying a house and what they want to do is borrow against their 401k or take money from their retirement accounts or their investment accounts. Now, I want you to do those retirement and investment accounts, and I also want you to separately save up so that you can own the house that you live in. Because those things, again, are the basics to me that get people wealthy. And When people cash out their retirement accounts, especially if they're young to use it for down payments on whatever it might be, it builds bad habits. And once that money is pulled away and put in your retirement accounts, I want you to pretend that that money is not there for you anymore. You just don't want to touch it, but you want to be able to buy a house or be able to do things separately from your investing. And that's when I talk about that $100,000 salary, the 20% off the top, and what to do with that $20,000 every year. And ideally, if you can live well beyond your means, you can start to save even more than 20% off the top. But a lot of reasons why people want to borrow against their 401ks is because they want to quit. The progress feels too slow. Things are not happening as fast as they want. And again, it's trying to understand playing the long game versus playing the short game. Okay. And the fifth point is this. You want to protect that first 100,000 and you want to protect those retirement accounts like it was the whole foundation, like it was the whole starting point. You don't want to go backwards because that was the hardest part. You got to that point, you built up that part, and you don't want to screw up the part that you did the most work to make happen. So when you think about that as being the foundation, the starting point, the entry level, and again, my daughter, as you guys, if you watch my real estate videos, you know she's worked really hard on this, and she always feels like she's behind when in reality, she is so much further ahead than what she thinks. Now, with that being said, sometimes it's hard to avoid that lifestyle creep. Sometimes it's hard to feel like you don't get to do what you want. But it's a huge milestone when you get to that first six figures put away in your savings and investing when your net worth is 100,000 or more. And that's when the goal is to keep doing it aggressively, to continue to live below your means and keep taking 20% off the top and keep automating your investments. Because if you do those things, that's where you're going to win. If not, this is when you're going to have a disaster down the road. And I know, nobody wants to talk about 10 and 20 and 30 years down the road, and they don't want to talk about this long game. But the long game is easy if you start with small amounts of money, okay? So with that being said, if you're someone who's sitting here and you have 5 or 20 or even, let's say, $50,000 already saved up, be proud of yourself. You did a good job, and the goal is to make it to that six-figure number first. So let's figure out a way to get there. Let's figure out a way, if you have questions about what should I or should not be doing to get those things, and don't quit, because if you're the person who's able to create that first $100,000, you've done the hardest part. So here's what I want you to do. Comment below. Where are you in this journey on your first $100,000? So if you have questions, reach out to me. Hopefully this will help you get some motivation to get started in this process. And I'm happy to help. So reach out to me anytime.